Well, for about 9 years now, I have known of Dr. Stephen Greer, and I've known him now for several years since I've been doing Coast to Coast AM. A man dedicated, a man who has pushed himself very, very far, sometimes to the brink, to try to get this Disclosure Project in the minds of all of us in this country and worldwide. And this time, for the very first time, I've read something that is just so compelling and so emotional in basically his memoirs, Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, where he just lays it all out about his own personal experience trying to do what he has done in this field for so many years. In a moment, our special guest, Dr. Stephen Greer on Coast to Coast AM. Dr. Stephen Greer, founder, CEO of Space Energy Access Systems, also the founder and director of the Disclosure Project. He is an emergency physician, former chairman of the Department of Emergency Medicine at Caldwell Memorial Hospital. Dr. Greer is a lifetime member of Omega Alpha, the nation's most prestigious medical honor society. He has appeared on several national programs, including, obviously, Coast to Coast, but Larry King Show, CBS, the BBC, NTV in Japan. Dr. Greer has been supervising a worldwide search for alternative energy sources, specifically those known as zero-point or over-unity devices, with a plan to identify and develop systems which will hopefully eliminate the need for fossil fuels. And, of course, you know about the Disclosure Project. We're going to talk with Dr. Greer tonight. Stephen, I got to tell you, you poured your guts out in Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge. You put your whole life in there.
Well, I put a lot of it in there. It actually is an oral history. A couple years ago, we had about 25 people out here at our farm in near Thomas Jefferson's home in Virginia here, and I pretty much spoke for a week about what I had experienced since my youth, what I'd experienced doing the Disclosure Project and briefing people like the CIA director and the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and all these officials in Washington, and really put it into sort of human terms of what it's been like for me personally to do this and sort of be on the, hot seat dealing with this very difficult issue for now 16 years.
Well, I have listened to you for years with Art and then with me over the last couple of years. And in the book, I've learned so much more about you that I didn't know in talking to you, and I didn't know when I heard your interviews with Art before. I mean, this one got personal, and there were moments where I was sharing your incredible emotions that were obviously there, and there were other moments I was happy with you and frustrated with you and everything else as you went along to try to get the world to understand what you've been trying to do all these years.
Right. I mean, in a sense, this book, which is called Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, is my own personal disclosure. And a lot of people have asked me over the years, good God, why did you do this? What compelled you to leave your medical work to get this information out to the world? And why? What happened to you? And this is a book that really describes the personal dimension of it from the time when I was very young, 8 or 9 years old, and actually saw one of these UFOs at fairly close range, and subsequently had a number of contact experiences with the actual ETs. And this continued on up through my college years, where I had a number of amazing close encounters. And I sort of describe what the nexus of these encounters involved, and it really involves that place within ourselves where the conscious mind becomes a universal resonator, and I think is the universal communicator across all dimensions and all of space and time. And I try to explain this to people to give a glimpse to the reader of what it's been like for me to experience these things, and also what's really been the motivating force behind my involvement in these issues.
When you were doing this and you were in a position to leave your chairmanship of the ER room at the hospital and devote your time to disclosure, I mean, were people looking at you like, Stephen, have you lost it? What are you doing?
Yeah, well, I think that the people who haven't understood what's really behind the effort have asked that. And there's several things behind this effort. One is some experiences I had in my youth, which we can talk about later if you'd like,
sure,
that showed me a future of not just world peace, but of universal peace and what the future of the human race really entails. And that's really, in a sense, what this book is about. It's a vision of not only where we are and sort of what time we're emerging out of, but what is the time on that near horizon that's approaching very quickly, where humanity is not only going to be a global civilization, but will be an interplanetary one. And eventually, I'm convinced we're going to be extraterrestrials to other civilizations that are emerging out in space. And when I found out, of course, not only about that issue, but also from sources that we developed through the 1990s and up and well as recently as last week, sources within the intelligence and technology communities, that the world that we're living in is a faint shadow of the world we can have and should have, and that all sorts of intervening agendas that have to do with secrecy and greed and, if I might say so, stupidity, have withheld from the human race that good future, which is really our birthright, and which we are long overdue to attain. And frankly, this involves being able to live in a sustainable fashion on this planet using technologies that we know exist and can prove exist, and have been withheld from humanity, but mainly because of a massive power grab around the world that's been spinning out of control for at least 50 years and perhaps 75 years.
You're in an industry now, or a field, where you have so many people who are complimentary about what you have done in the efforts that you have undertaken. Then you've got a very small handful, that is, I don't know whether you could say they're jealous of what you've done, Stephen, or bitter of what you've done, but they've taken their shots because they're not happy with the direction some of the things have gone in. And we'll talk about some of that too, because it's just
right.
Because you mention a lot of that in your book.
You can't step into this field without stepping into enormous controversy. And one of the things I point out to people is that if you take the Canadian memo from 1951, the so-called Wilbur Smith memo, a top-secret declassified memo, and in it, in this top-secret memo, it says that this subject is the most classified subject within the United States, and that the secrecy surrounding it surpasses the development of the hydrogen bomb, which, of course, we were working on in 1951. And if you look at that, you can understand that a field like this that's been relatively unfunded and not very professionalized is very easily infiltrated by people who I think are, to use an old phrase, agents provocateurs. They're people who are out there to stir up trouble and to confuse people and to really create a whole lot of smoke and mirrors so that people don't know what the hell is going on, quite frankly. And one of my tasks has been to try to sift through that and see, to the best of my ability, with my own limitations as a human being, what really is going on, and sharing that with the public in a way that can be constructive and positive. And so that's really been what's been motivating this whole effort. And, I had a conversation a couple weeks ago when I was in Canada with former Minister of Defense Paul Hellyer, mm-hmm. and he and I had virtually an entire day together to discuss this issue. And one of the things that he shared with me was that he knew that the world was being run by, quote, a permanent shadow government that had nothing to do with elections and nothing to do with democracy and nothing to do with the promise of America or the promise of the human race. And he knew this to be a fact, and we discussed this and how it related to UFO secrecy and the technologies behind it, and also the whole issue of how the human relationship, which is very embryonic and early, with extraterrestrial civilizations has been hijacked by shills for this covert shadow government who would like to scare the heck out of people and would like to see that we spin off in the direction of conflict rather than in the direction of universal peace, which I think is the destiny of the human race.
I want to get your reaction later to Hellyer, but you know what? A few years ago, I would have said to you or anybody else who talked about a shadow government or people who are controlling elected officials, I would have said, you guys are nuts. Right. Not anymore, Stephen. Not anymore. I am now more convinced than ever that what you say about that is absolutely true. And part of the program now has steered it into a direction so that one day in the future, all of us can be able to fight back at this, because you